Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Self-manifestation. Let's talk about it. Should we talk about how my mouth doesn't always work right? Self-manifestation. It's a large subject and it's a small subject. It is the subject. Uh, it is the object of Buddhist practice to disassemble, understand, and get the meaning of what those two simple little words have in a profound way to do with our experience of our highest potential, our Buddhahood, our clarity of mind, our clarity of living. So, I've talked about this subject. Oh my God. I've talked about this subject in many ways. It's in a lot of my writings. It has to do with the origins of life. And my insight came through a lot of study over years of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. And I have to say, just starting out, that if you're looking for information on the 3,000 realms, um, number one, it's difficult to find a varied opinion on this. Secondly, what you will find will usually be straight out of translations of texts, more often than not Nichiren. Um, there used to be links and information you could find on Tendai's actual teachings. That you're going to have to dig into actual scholarship from universities to find people that are still working on those translations. Great concentration and insight comes to mind. And although Tendai doesn't explicitly name it the 3,000 realms in a single moment, he does almost specifically. I'm trying to remember how he put it. It's been a while since I've read those books. Um, but it is in there. So conceptually, as you constantly hear as we talk about studying Buddhism, uh, reading these documents, um, with the eye toward a deeper understanding of how they apply to our single lives, how we can make this method work for our own life, um, you will find within the words a deeper meaning that will trigger insights into your own everyday life. This is the nature of Buddhist study. This is how the expedient means work. Don't get hooked up on just the words and trying to understand what's this sentence mean. What is trying to understand what somebody was writing in the late 600s. You can't possibly understand the mind of that individual. But if they were a bodhisattva, if they were somebody dedicated scholar who was unearthing and translating and offering the truest form of what they were reading and offering you, their ego should be out of the way so that you can study today with the same idea of unearthing meaning that without them standing in the way. Um, to the degree that that's possible in human form, this is the nature of all the teachings. So it's important that you look for your specific insight into these teachings, because the teachings are just that. They're words, they're teachings in order to describe with words something else, something of great profundity that really compounds the problem of communicating these ideas, because language is a layer of understanding that can be easily understood differently by the reader. It's a layer of obfuscation, if you will. But I can't just touch your head and say, here's enlightenment. I wish I could. So I have to use this same human samsaric messaging form of words in order to guide you into your own realization of what it is I'm trying to describe. This is the nature of all Buddhist study. This is why Nichiren and Buddha himself spent several words admonishing even his students, don't get so hung up about the words. You keep asking me the same question 80 different ways about the same sentence. Get what I'm talking about. Don't dissect the words I'm using. And this I'm describing is an actual Gosho, not Gosho, sorry, a sutra. Read the Lankavatara Sutra. There are other sutras, but in the Lankavatara, there's specifically 80 questions asked by this same monk that Shakyamuni answered every single way. And at some point, you can kind of read in the Lankavatara, you got a little fed up with, come on, you've asked the same question 80 times or however many times it was at the point. Listen to what I'm saying. It's basically what he was saying in the Lankavatara. But the benefit of the Lankavatara is that by answering it, the same question asked it slightly different ways repeatedly, we get the benefit of seeing this same thing several different ways, which is why Shakyamuni gave this sermon, because he was pointing out how each one of us, even if we're all part of the same era, the same time, the same capacity, we will all individually see the truth in our own way. It's a universal truth, but it's not understood universally. This is samsara. Each one of us sees and understands things through our own series of veils and assumptions. Why am I talking about this when I'm supposed to be talking about self-manifestation? Well, I am, because this is what's going to get us there. To understand self-manifestation, you have to understand how uniquely individual and yet all the same we are. So, um, I have a feeling this is going to be a part one. um, should we start small and then go big, or big then go small? I think I've tried the big to small with the origins of life and the 3,000 realms. So let's use the 3,000 realms again, but let's start from small and go to large. And maybe this will make more sense this way. I don't know. I may actually learn something just talking about this. That's the nature of Sangha and sharing with other members. So thank you. So what is 3,000 realms in a single moment? Thought moment. And I think that thought, that word thought in that sentence is critically important. You've heard me say and describe, and others have done this too, I'm not alone in this, that when Buddhism refers to life and death, rebirth more specifically, with the concept of 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, we finally understand the meaning of that. Because there is no reincarnation in Buddhism. There simply isn't. That's a leftover Hindu kind of thing. And that's still practiced today. I don't mean to say it's some old relic. Well, it is, but I mean, it's still practiced today, any Hindu religion. There are several Hindu sects, so I shouldn't lump them all together, but reincarnation is quite popular throughout the Indian continent or subcontinent. Anyway, um, Buddhism strictly has no such thing as reincarnation. What is meant, again, this is a comparison between earlier teachings and the later teachings, is that when the capacity of people was ready to understand the idea that there is no afterlife, there is no rebirth, in the sense of uh, leaving this body and then entering some other realm, uh, heaven, hell, all of that. That dialogue, those kinds of words were rampant throughout early teachings of Buddhism. Can you guess why? Because this was the environment Buddha was teaching in. He was teaching in India amongst all of these Brahmanists and Hindus and so on and so forth that grew up with this idea that, yeah, I could come back as a bird or I could come back as a different caste. See, religions throughout the world have always been about governance of the people. This is why it gets so conflated, even in this country. And I say even because it's quite a modern country, the United States. Um, uh, Canada is much older. I think Montreal is over 800 years old in its establishment. And it's something, the United States in its entirety is less than a third of that. So, historically speaking, you would think that the newest country would have the least amount of baggage it carries from old mythologies. But, and that may have been true when the United States was first established, but those Puritans came over here and boy, they did their best to enforce their Sharia law of their sort. Um, and so we have those, they're everywhere in government today. We see it all the time. Um, and this really muddies the water. It keeps, people are born into this and they get false ideas about what governs our daily life. Um, so, sorry for those telephone interruptions. I shouldn't even have it in here. Anyway, so what is meant then as we get into the later teachings of Buddhism about lifetime after lifetime, about an Avicii hell, about, they never talk about this glorious heavenly land. The only thing that comes close to it in Buddhism is the Pure Land, right? It's a little bit more earthly, a little bit more tangible and mundane than this lofty heaven. Although the word heaven is used in a lot of translations, again, we got to remember we're reading translations of people who've grown up with the same mysticism in their lives, no matter how deeply scholared they are. So, as we get into the latter teachings, and Tendai tried to, he did his best to break this apart, and the teachers after him, Yaolo and Dengyo and so forth, all the way to Nichiren, have done the same thing. The 3,000 realms in a single moment, a thought moment, is probably the most concerted effort to just eschew all of this rhetoric, all of these meaningful words in lieu of getting the meaning behind or beneath the words. And that is simply this, that our lives are experienced. Nobody takes a pill or is given a magic spell or or is taught via schools, secular schools, what it is to have your life experience. Right? Everything we read, learn, even pills or magic or whatever, is something imposed on our experience of life. It's really just another colored filter, a lens, right? Like a camera. You can put a red cellophane in front of the lens, and you'll block out all the red light, and you'll get these very dramatic looking, almost black and white kind of features in your photograph. Uh, These are filters. They changed your perceived reality, but the real reality, the clear reality under that, hasn't changed at all. So, um, our minds, your mind, apart from my mind, each of our minds will see with the filters we've inculcated into our thinking with and will experience life through those filters. And because we're rather blissfully unaware of these filters or how many of them exist, we perceive our life experience to be the one. And in many ways it is. It is your life experience. But you have to remember what the implication of that is. That means that when you look outside with a friend and you both look at an oak tree in the backyard or an aircraft in the sky or stars in the sky, that all of those things, even your own reflection in a mirror, is uniquely your experience of the same things, because the same things is a fallacy of language that says that your friend sees the same thing, but they do not. They see the thing through their own perceptual lenses, and they experience that thing in their own unique way, albeit very, very, very similar or non-similar. They experience it in their own way. See my video on the fountain analogy, where 10 people walk through a park and see a fountain and then are asked to describe it later. I dig into that a little deeper than that simple analogy. And so that's where this analogy comes from. So we all experience our own world in our own way. And here in the background, the little chorus going, self-manifestation. We are manifesting in each moment a version of self, albeit our own version. It is a version. Talk to anyone who's known you, even your whole lifetime, and they will have a version of you, and it will not completely agree with your version of you. It never will. It never can. Their perceptive filters are different than yours. So this is the small of self-manifestation. We manifest a self unique to ourself each and every moment. Now, 3,000 realms in every thought moment. The moment it took you to hear me say this sentence is actually a string of uncountable moments. Start to dissect this. So in each moment of thought, now from a Buddhist perspective, there are, and I've read different, these are all methods of understanding this concept. I remember reading there were 180,000, over 180,000 decisions made in each moment of life. Now, is that precise? How is that measured? It doesn't matter. What matters is the significance of making that statement is that the conscious moments, decisions and moments that we have pale in comparison to the actual number of decisions being made long before that thought becomes conscious to us. So our own conscious awareness is very limited in the depth of understanding of how we create our experience. This is really important to understand now. Now we're getting a little deeper into self-manifestation. But let me give you a really terrible example, but I think it'll help you think in this way. You're walking down, or you just got home, and you're about to walk into your home. And suddenly, without notice, you didn't notice that this was about to happen, it just suddenly shocks you into this moment. Some large dog starts just frothing at the mouth, barking at you. You just, rah, 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 it just startles you, and And then maybe you look and you perceive the dog, but you don't even need to look at the dog to verify you just experienced that. You just hightail it into the house and slam the door, right? Or maybe not. Maybe you turn toward it with your adrenaline flowing and you challenge the dog. I don't know. Each of us is going to respond differently to that. My point, though, is the way you respond to that dog or that event, what you do, is based on countless decisions that you've made over your lifetime. And even, well, we won't go to that large. We'll keep this small. In your lifetime. Perhaps you were bitten by a dog when you were 3 years old, and that deeply imprinted on your human mind. And I say human mind because this is exactly what we're talking about with self manifestation. There is a human mind of experience and knowledge um, that contains all our human filters of perception. And in that fraction of a second of that first bark of that dog, you did not catalog every influence that you've had since childhood about dogs, about barks, about decibels, about how you respond to this kind of shock. You just responded. It was immediate. It was all right there. And in that moment, you had to make a decision or freeze or whatever. But your reaction at that moment and the ensuing moments is a cumulative thing of all of these decisions that you've made, at once maybe conscious, but later driven down into the memory bank, the fluid memory bank. And we'll talk about the nine consciousnesses in Buddhism, because that's where this plays in. All of Buddhism is trying to get your head around this moment. And when we chant with Gohonzon as our focal point, we are reaching a level of mind that is pre-filters, that is without filters, that goes right through all these filters to something essential. That essential Buddha mind has none of these cumulative billions of filters we've accumulated in our lifetime. This is why it's called clarity. This is why it's called awakening. So every time we chant, we're burrowing through all of these accumulated experiences, which are just thoughts. And they color the room. They impair our vision, so to speak. But without them, we are not the self we have manifested. The self you manifest today, with all of its uncountable moments, one to the next, are transmissions of all of those filters, moment to moment. And some get foggy, some get revised, and some get stronger, that create our version of self. All of that is happening at such a phenomenally it's an illogical number. And you hear this all the time in Buddhism: innumerable, unfathomable, immeasurable. Because in each moment, all of these decisions and filters are being re-imprinted into the next moment. So what is the 3,000 realms? It's a numerical calculation of the teachings in Buddhism to try to get your head around that activity from moment to moment. And the only way you're aware, even tangentially, of each of those moments is through thought, to using our mind. And our mind is the repository of all these thoughts. Now I'm running out of power, so I'm going to stop here and restart. And we're back. Sorry about that. I have on order a power supply I'm supposed to get this week for this camera, so I won't run into those interruptions anymore. Kind of breaks the stream of thought. But anyway, I'll try my best to get back to it. So, um, this 3,000 realms is a numerical composite of the 10 factors, the 10 worlds, the three realms, and the 10 within the 10. Anyway, you multiply it out. I have a whole video on that, and you can research that for yourself as well. And I have papers on it on my website, threefoldlotus.com, so that you can print them out and study them that way. It's an important concept. It's a central concept, and this is why Nichiren brings it up quite often. Um, it's a core realization of what Buddhism is trying to accomplish, but it's not something that would have been easy to understand in the early teachings of Buddhism. This is why it took over 1,000 years for it to even come out in Tendai's analysis, and then another 1,000 years to really coalesce into the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment as a part of teachings. But it was not that popular because it was just too difficult to understand. But today, certainly, and with Nichiren's help, and with our minds, quite frankly, our developed capacity, which was always the impediment in Shakyamuni's teachings, and he knew it. He forecasted it. I prefer that word to prophecy because prophecy has some kind of magical tone to it. He forecasted that this was going to be the case. It is why he ended up teaching in the specific periods and sequence that he did. When Buddha first started teaching, he went out for full. He had just experienced that enlightenment, so he was like, "Ba ba 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 ba." This is what it's like, and and he got sad puppy looks from his students, like, They weren't ready. Well, for good reason. They had not gone through the 6 or 7 years of crazy resolve and dedication that Shakyamuni had, Siddhartha Gautama had, in order to become Shakyamuni Buddha. So he backed off. He only taught the Flower Garland Sutra, the Kigan Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, for 2-3 weeks, according to many documents. And he dropped it and thought, probably with that enlightenment, backed off and thought, oh man, I'm trying to teach this dog how to fly, right? So he backed off and he started teaching in stages. So he could raise the capacity of his students without necessarily going through the intense privations he did, but he went through a lot of the same steps with them. That's why early Buddhists were cloistered, were taught ascetic practices, ascetism. Don't eat for 3 days so you can know the nature of your stomach and hunger. Don't speak for a year so you can know the nature of the fallacies of words and observe how people try to communicate. On and on and on. These are all early teachings, but they're not Buddhism. They were teachings leading to greater, deeper understanding of Buddhism by training the human mind how to perceive reality, even to the point of how to understand that their mind and body were connected and they affected one another. Right? This is even in the legends of the Shaolin Temple in China. When the Buddhist scholar Bodhidharma came to the Shaolin Temple and found the monks there just ravaged with sickness or weakness and tired, and their rice stores, their food storage was always being raided, and they weren't even healthy enough to meditate properly. And so Bodhidharma created a physical exercise, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's the sinew and tendon regeneration exercises. So think about how sick those people must have been. And he used Buddhism to train them into what later became known as Tai Chi or Tai Chi Chuan. What is Tai Chi Chuan? The meaning of Tai Chi Chuan is, and I can make a whole other video about that, but it's basically using your mental, cultivating your mental power of influence and understanding how it's connected to as a motive force, chi, you hear all the time, as your biological motive force to take any kind of action, whether it's thought, word, or manifest in form. And because it was an exercise, the chuan is to make a fist. In other words, to create, to manifest a physical act from this management of internal will or biological motive force, Tai Chi Chuan. Okay? But it started as the exercises of sinew and tendon regeneration. Anyway, so back to Buddhism. Um, this mind-body understanding now shifts later to the body being just kind of a hitchhiker on this path because it's all happening in the mind. The 3,000 realms in a single moment, a thought moment, I keep leaving that out, that's karmic, keeps us aware that this very thought you're having right now, that I'm having struggling with my speech, is a filtered reality by my own making, my own past experiences, my own interpretation of those experiences, whether real or not. Maybe you had a really bad dream and you perceived something that to this day stays with you in certain occasions and rises up in your mind as a reality and affects colors and influences not only your thought in that moment, but the waterfall of thoughts and actions you'll take after that moment. And what does all of this represent? These thought moments. How do we experience any of them? With our human mind. And with our human mind, this becomes the understanding of our individual worlds. And your individual world, my individual world, is a reflection of the way we perceive ourself. Who am I? I am the result of this incredible filtration of information that I have created. Now, don't be scared. Because I think when I first started to see this, it was rather unsettling that what I perceived in each moment of my life to be solid was so permeable, so loosely assembled. But even if you take a fall leaf from a tree that's crumbling, if you put enough of them on top of one another, you can create a mighty mountain. Even if all of those leaves are turned to dust. Or the sands of the Ganges. Do you see the expedient means here? So when in Buddhist teachings we read as great as 500 Ganges rivers of particles of sands over millions of kalpas and blah blah blah. These are numeric impossibilities, getting you to follow that road of thinking to try to embrace the immensity of what is occurring. Your life, quote unquote, is incalculable. immeasurable amounts of information, decisions, thoughts that culminate in some fluid moment to moment version of what you think yourself is. And in Buddhism, we look at that with awe instead of fear. And we understand that that is the ego. It is a mountain built out of dust, innumerable dust particles of fallen leaves. And by chanting, we can go right through that mountain to the core of the earth, and we can see our true origin, our true perceptive aperture. Not a self in the sense of a human self, but a self in the sense of a self of all creation, of all things, of all thought, of all being. In this sense, we can transcend the universe itself, because even the universe is subject to this process. Now, I know I went big really fast there, but staying at the small end, there is such a vast contemplative richness in that, that by the more we chant about that, and John, I'm talking to you, the more we contemplate the immensity of that manifestation of what we know, call, experience as a human self, the more we can be awed by it and see what we're navigating, the more we value Myoho Kyo, the more we value the idea, the knowledge of a clarity subsuming it, beneath it, that is completely free of, liberated from all of those layers, immeasurable as they are. This is the liberation Shakyamuni spoke of, because each of those accumulated thoughts and the ones that have been eschewed, the ones hung on to, and the ones buried deep, all of them are ourselves attachments, because they're all fallacies. They're all momentary perceptions of a reality created by other momentary perceptions. It all crumbles very easily, suddenly, upon awakening. This is what we're searching for when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We dedicate ourselves, Namu. We're resolved to bathing in, perceiving in, existing in that Buddha nature, that Buddha mind, wherewith maybe it's hours of daimoku, maybe it's decades of daimoku, maybe it happens in 5 minutes when you fuse with Gohanzen. In that moment, all of those immeasurable moments of perception, they're just not there. You don't even see them go. You're suddenly not in them. And you're just experiencing this phenomenal clarity. And it usually, I mean, I'm making it sound large, but many times when I've fused with Gohanzen and just keep chanting, the only thing I might realize, because it's such a small thing, is that I'm smiling as I'm chanting. And that makes me giddy. I turn into, human reference, a child. But a child with the awareness of many years of experience, but without all of the stuff, all of the dust, all of the leaves. When I stop chanting after a session like that, which I have to convince myself to stop because it's so wonderful. Sorry, it's a word, wonderful. You can call it something else if you like. Freeing. That I don't understand. I don't even perceive in those moments the freedom, because in order to feel freedom or liberation, you have to have the other as the counterweight. All of the stuff. The stuff's just not there. So everything looks new. And I could turn away from Butsudan just to test it because I'm still human and look around and the sun looks brighter. The leaves look brighter. The, the room just seems like it's just forming itself moment to moment around me, that it just, it doesn't, nothing, it's not that nothing matters. It matters deeply, but it doesn't have the weight of, I don't know, responsibility. I don't know. It's a strange thing. It's very, very hard to describe. And I'll rely on the words of Shakyamuni himself. This wisdom, this perception of Buddhas can only be shared amongst Buddhas. So when you get there, let me know, because then we won't need to talk about it. Words won't, they'll be incidental. They'll get in the way, actually. We can just look at each other and smile. It sounds a little bit nuts, but that's the nature of life. Once you've touched that, even as you slowly return into your mundane human life, things look different. Certain behaviors uh, bother you more, not bother you, but they just seem more abhorrent than they used to. But they don't touch you as deeply. You're still human. But understand this, and this is very much a part of self manifestation. Shakyamuni was clear that this human samsaric reality, with all of its attachments and sufferings and everything else, is the only place you will, in this lifetime that you have the tools to experience awakening, to experience this Buddhahood. Once you die, that that thought moment diminishes quickly and ceases to be there. Without the thought moment, there are no 3,000 realms. There are no, you could argue there are no need for 3,000 realms. But where are you? You are in a, you, self, has ceased to manifest. So you can't awaken something that is not awakenable. You can only awaken something that is extant in this form. So there's no afterlife. There's no other land. The other land is here and now. That description I gave you of when I fuse with Gohansen and everything seems to be brighter and lovely and new, that's the pure land. In the Avicii hell, when I'm not chanting and I get into arguments with people and it makes me furious, I'm in the Avicii hell. I need to go chant because I'm still a human guy with everything that implies. And the more I experience my Buddhahood, the more and more my human guy is modified. I'm imprinting leaves, moments, 3,000 realms, right? So I hope that helps you understand self-manifestation. It's, again, like Buddhahood. It is not something that is given to you, forced upon you, taken from you, held from you. It's of your own making. You're doing it right now. So where do you want to be right now? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you. Thank you so much, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, for watching, for asking these kinds of questions that motivate these videos for me and for every one of us. I appreciate you more than I can express. We'll see you in the next one. Namo Myoho.